There are Christmases we remember with joy, and some that mark a silence too loud to forget. That was the year Tyler didn't come home. Abby stood by the window, watching the snow fall, holding 2 mugs of cocoa, but only one heart still warm. No explanation, no call, no goodbye. Just an absence that echoed louder than bells. In a town where everyone knows everything, disappearing without a word wasn't just unusual. It was betrayal. Tyler had promised her a future under twinkling lights, but instead she got empty chairs and whispered pity. Her name became a conversation, her pain a rumor. Still, Abby stood tall. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she refused to let it define her. She didn't cry in public. She smiled through church carols and lit the tree alone. And when people asked, she said he must have had a reason, even if that reason left her rebuilding from pieces. Because that's what you do when love walks out. You don't chase it. You rise from the space it leaves behind. But what if the one who left returns? Not with flowers, but with scars. Not with promises, but with eyes that carry regret. Years later, a different man. Same small town. On a night eerily similar to the one he disappeared. Snow falling like before, but everything else changed. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about broken hearts that learn to beat again, but not in the same rhythm. It's about Christmas miracles that come in silence, about strength that grows in the cracks, and redemption that doesn't always arrive in grand gestures, but in presence. If you've ever felt forgotten during the holidays, if someone you trusted walked away without warning, if you've ever questioned whether forgiveness is possible, this story is for you. Because not all Christmases are joyful, but some are redemptive, and some rewrite endings we thought were already sealed. Abby didn't wait for Tyler. She built a life without him. But Christmas has a way of stirring what we bury, and when he walks back into town, the past demands to be heard. Not for the sake of pain, but so healing can finally speak. You'll want to stay until the final scene, because not all homecomings are wrapped in ribbon. Sometimes they come broken, raw, unannounced. But maybe, just maybe, that's where grace lives. Not in perfection, but in choosing to stay this time, no matter how late it is. Before you skip ahead or click away, pause. This story might look like theirs, but it could also be yours. One choice, one mistake, one absence, and the long road back. A road paved with silence, forgiveness, and snow. Tyler didn't come home that Christmas. But this one could change everything. Not with fairy tale endings, but with honest beginnings. With redemption, not performance. With truth, not excuses. This isn't about who was right or wrong. It's about what remains, what survives the winter, what blooms again after years of quiet, and whether love, real love, can still grow where trust was once buried and snow once covered every goodbye. So light the tree, pour yourself something warm, and come with us into a town where hearts heal slowly, but heal nonetheless. This Christmas, you might believe in miracles again. Because Tyler didn't come back with rehearsed words. He came back with tired eyes and calloused hands. No explanations, just presence. No grand apology, just the weight of time. And Abby? She didn't cry. She looked him in the eye and waited. Waited for what? For the truth. For something real. For a reason to open the door again. And maybe, this story is about what happens when someone dares to knock. Again. You'll see how a town remembers, how silence becomes pressure, and how a woman loved too deeply to pretend. You'll feel every emotion, every unsaid word, every snowflake that melted before the answer came. Because stories like this stay with us, especially at Christmas, when the lights go up but our hearts still ache, when memories haunt the carols, and one empty chair means everything. You'll see it, you'll feel it, you'll understand. This is the Christmas he didn't come home, and the one that finally brought him back. Stay until the end, you won't regret it. Some stories are meant to be felt, to be remembered, to be believed. Subscribe now to Redeemed Hearts and journey with us through this powerful Christmas redemption. Let it remind you that it's never too late to ask for forgiveness, to return, or to believe that love still lives in the quietest corners of December. Snow was falling gently that night, painting the small town in a blanket of white silence. Abby stood by the window of their modest house, watching the flakes gather on the porch rail. Christmas lights blinked softly in the distance, but her heart couldn't find the rhythm to match. Inside the kitchen, dinner sat untouched on the table. Roast chicken, 2 plates, candles lit. She had hoped it would be different this year, that he'd finally stop running from what he felt. But Tyler was late again, and this time, it felt like more than just time slipping away. When the door finally opened, she turned with a breath caught in her chest. He stepped in, brushing snow from his shoulders, eyes heavy with something unsaid. Abby searched his face for warmth, for effort, for presence, but found distance instead. "Sorry I'm late," he said, voice flat, eyes avoiding hers like fragile glass. She didn't ask where he'd been. She already knew it wasn't work. There had been too many missed dinners, too many vague excuses. And in her chest, something tired cracked a little more. They sat across from each other in silence, the ticking clock louder than their breaths. He picked at the food. She didn't bother. Outside, the world looked like a snow globe. Inside, they were falling apart. "I think I need space," he said suddenly, like dropping a plate that had already cracked. Abby blinked, trying to understand if he meant for a moment or forever. "Tonight?" she asked, her voice thin and trembling. He nodded. "I can't breathe here. I don't know who I am anymore." It wasn't anger she felt, at least not first. It was cold, the kind that no fireplace could warm. "I gave you space inside this home, Tyler. I gave you room to grow." He looked away, jaw tight. "It's not the space. It's me. I'm broken, Abby." But she had loved those broken parts. She had tried to stitch the cracks with patience, prayer, and presence. And now he was leaving with the pieces she had tried to hold together. He packed lightly, just a duffel bag and guilt. She stood in the doorway as he passed, half expecting him to stop, to look back, to remember that she was the one who believed in him when even he didn't. But he didn't turn around. The door clicked shut behind him, and the cold swept in like a final breath. Abby stood frozen, the sound of his footsteps fading into the night. She didn't cry right away. There was too much silence for tears. Instead, she walked back to the dinner table and blew out the candles. Then she sat in the quiet and listened to the hum of the fridge, the ache of the walls. Christmas music played softly down the street, cruel in its cheer. She picked up his plate and scraped it into the trash. The food was cold now. So was everything else. That night, she curled up on the couch, wrapped in the quilt his mother had sewn. The Christmas tree blinked beside her, a reminder of promises broken in twinkling colors. She thought of the first Christmas they spent together, when love was enough, when they had nothing but each other and it felt like everything. Now, she had everything except him, and it didn't feel like enough. She whispered a prayer, but it was mostly silence wrapped in hope. Tyler drove through the snow, not sure where he was going. Every mile away felt heavier, not lighter. He had thought leaving would bring him peace, but all he felt was the echo of the door closing behind him. He saw the ghost of her face in the rearview mirror, strong, still, stunned. He gripped the wheel harder, wondering when he had stopped deserving her grace. But he couldn't say what he didn't understand himself. Back in the town, word spread faster than he expected. Not through gossip, but through the kind of silence that changes how people look at you. Abby showed up at work the next morning with swollen eyes and steady hands. She smiled at customers and decorated cookies, but part of her heart was missing. The townsfolk didn't ask. They just watched with quiet reverence the way someone watches a church in the rain. They knew she was hurting, and they loved her all the more for how she carried it. Tyler stayed away, not just from Abby, but from the whole town. He moved to another city, took a job that paid well but gave nothing back. He drowned himself in noise, bars, business, busyness. But every December, no matter where he was, snow still brought her memory. Her eyes, her strength, the way she never begged him to stay. That haunted him more than anything. because it meant she knew her worth. In the quiet of her little house, Abby started making small changes. She moved the couch, painted the hallway, took down the photos, not in anger, but peace. She stopped checking her phone at night, stopped waiting for the knock that never came. And in that letting go, something new began to bloom. Not bitterness, not coldness, but the quiet courage of someone who chooses to live, even when it hurts. The town watched her heal in pieces, not all at once, but in the way she smiled again at the bakery, in the way she walked to church on Sunday, her head high, in the way she laughed one morning when a child spilled cocoa on her shoes. She never pretended it didn't break her. She just refused to let the break define her, and that somehow made her even more radiant. Tyler didn't know how long he would stay away. At first it was just for the holidays, then it became a season, then a year. But distance didn't bury the guilt, it watered it. Every Christmas light reminded him of what he left behind, and no gift ever filled the space she used to hold. He thought leaving would save them both, but it only saved his fear. Abby didn't speak badly of him. When people asked, she simply said, "He needed something I couldn't give." And though it wasn't true, it was graceful. She didn't need to make him small to feel tall. That wasn't who she was. She still prayed for him some nights. Not that he'd come back, but that he'd become someone worth coming back as. The bakery became her refuge. Cinnamon and clove in the air, laughter behind the counter. She poured her heart into Christmas cookies and handmade ornaments. It gave her hands something to do when her heart was quiet. Children came in to watch her decorate with snowflake sugar and stories. She found healing in giving joy. And in December, that was more than enough. One night, a letter arrived. No return address, just her name, written in familiar handwriting. She held it in her hands, her breath caught like the first snowflake of winter. It was short, honest, broken. "I'm sorry I left. I'm not the same man. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know." She read it twice, then folded it slowly, and placed it beside the nativity on the windowsill. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't matter, but because she had already shed all the tears she had for that chapter. Now, she was living in another one. One where peace wasn't about who stayed, but about who she had become while they were gone. And in that stillness, Christmas felt like a beginning again. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft, persistent, quiet. Inside, Abby lit the fireplace and curled into her armchair. The Christmas tree glowed gently in the corner. She looked around the room that once felt empty. Now it felt full, with memory, with strength, with silent miracles. And though she didn't know what would come next, she knew who she was, and that was everything. The town of Willow Creek had a way of holding on. It wasn't just the Christmas lights that came up the same every year, or the way the snow seemed to fall in perfect, deliberate patterns. It was the people. Their memories lingered like the scent of pine in the winter air. Every house, every street corner, every familiar face carried a story. And for Abby, that story was one of waiting and letting go. 2. People didn't ask her directly, but they watched. Their eyes lingered on her a moment longer than they should. "Is she okay?" They'd whisper. "How's she doing, really?" They didn't need to ask. She could see it in their expressions, half concern, half pity. Willow Creek didn't let things go easily, especially when it involved love. 3. At the bakery, Abby kept busy. It wasn't that she didn't love her work. It was that it gave her a reason to breathe. The sound of flour being sifted, sugar being stirred into dough. These were the things that grounded her now. The warmth of the oven, the sweet aroma of cinnamon and spice became her escape from the quiet questions that filled the town. No one had to ask. They just knew. Tyler was gone. 4. Some days she felt like the town's memorial to him. They still remembered the boy who had left, the one who used to come home every Christmas, the one who had promised her a future they'd planned in high school. Now all they had were stories. Stories of what he was, what he could have been, and those stories lived through her. 5. The streets felt smaller now, as if they could never stretch far enough to hold all the memories. Tyler's absence was still a shadow that followed her wherever she went. Abby walked past the old cafe where they'd shared their first date, and the corner shop where they'd kissed in the rain. The town never forgot, and neither did she. But she was trying to. 6. Her house, which had once been their home, now felt like a place she was merely visiting. The rooms were filled with echoes of his laughter, his footsteps, but now every corner was just a reminder of what was missing. She painted the walls a different color, changed the curtains, rearranged the furniture, but nothing changed. The house still carried his ghost, and she wasn't sure if she wanted it to stay or to leave. 7. Abby found solace in the small moments. The way the sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, the sound of the wind rustling the trees outside, the laughter of children at the park. Life, despite everything, kept moving forward, and for the first time, Abby allowed herself to move with it. Not because she was over the past, but because the future needed her to keep going. 8. At church, they still sang the songs they used to sing together. Abby sat in the same pew every Sunday, the spot where Tyler once stood beside her. The hymns filled the room, but they also filled her chest with something heavier. She didn't sing as loudly anymore. She closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, as if it could somehow fill the empty space between her and the life she had lost. 9. The holidays rolled around again, and with them came the memories of the Christmas Tyler didn't come home. People would smile at her, say how strong she was for making it through another year. But they didn't know how much it hurt to smile, how much it hurt to decorate the tree alone, to fill the stockings with no one to share them with, how much it hurt to still love someone who was no longer there. 10. She didn't blame the town for remembering him. How could they forget? He had been the life of every Christmas party, the smile that lit up the room, the promise of better days. But they didn't know how heavy it had been to watch him walk away. They didn't know how deep the wound went, and they didn't know how much she had grown to fear his return. 11. Still, she carried on. Abby made pies for the Christmas bake sale. She helped organize the holiday fundraiser, and she smiled at the familiar faces that came into her bakery each morning. She didn't stop living, but she couldn't pretend there wasn't a gap in her heart, a space where Tyler should have been. 12. The first snow of December came a little earlier than usual that year. It dusted the streets with a fine layer of white, coating everything in soft, cold perfection. Abby looked out her window at the familiar scene, feeling a strange mix of peace and longing. She could almost hear the sound of Tyler's laugh, see his face in the reflection of the snow-covered trees. 13. One night as she walked home from the bakery, she saw a man standing near the old oak tree. His back was to her, but there was something about his stance, something familiar about the way he stood that made her stop. She caught her breath, and for a moment, she believed it was him. 14. But when he turned around, she saw only a stranger. A man who resembled Tyler but wasn't him. The man smiled politely, tipping his hat. Abby nodded in return, her heart pounding in her chest. That fleeting moment, that shadow of a ghost, was all she had left of him, and she hated that it still had the power to shake her. 15. She had moved on. She had built a life without him. But some pieces of the past remained, like stubborn shadows that wouldn't leave. They whispered in her dreams, in the quiet corners of the house, in the spaces where memories once lived and now gathered dust. 16. Abby still had questions. Why had he left? Why hadn't he come back? Why had he chosen to walk away from a life they had planned together? She didn't know the answers, and she had stopped asking. But sometimes, in the stillness of the night, she wondered if he ever regretted it. 17. The town continued to move, the snow falling softly every December, the Christmas lights twinkling in the same way they always had. But for Abby, everything felt different now. She wasn't the girl waiting for someone to return. She was the woman who had learned to stand on her own. And that realization, painful as it was, gave her the strength to carry on. 18. Tyler's absence had shaped her, but it would not define her. She would keep walking, keep working, keep building. And no matter what the town remembered, Abby would live in the space she had created. Strong, independent, and free. Abby didn't say it out loud, but she had stopped waiting for Tyler long before she admitted it to herself. The Christmas he didn't come home was the moment something inside her shifted. Not a dramatic change, but a quiet, undeniable realization that life would move forward, with or without him. So she planted herself in this small town, like roots digging into frozen soil. She filled her days with things that mattered: work, church events, helping her mother. People would still whisper about her, but now they whispered different things, like how strong she had become. She didn't feel strong, but she acted like it until it became real. 2. Her bakery became her refuge. It wasn't just the warmth of the oven or the joy of creating. It was the rhythm of it all. The kneading of dough, the scent of cinnamon filling the air. She didn't know how to breathe without it. It was in these moments that Abby found herself again, whole and productive. She poured her heart into her work, knowing it was one of the few things she could control. 3. Still, there were nights when the loneliness crept in like an unwelcome guest. She would sit by the window, the snow falling outside, and her mind would wander back to the past, to the man who once filled that space. Tyler wasn't there, and he hadn't been for so long. And yet, a small part of her always wondered, what if he returned? But she stopped answering that question. The answer had to come from herself, not from the man who had left her behind. 4. Abby threw herself into her work, giving her all to the bakery, to the community events, to the children who came in to learn how to decorate cookies. She made pies for the Christmas sale and organized charity drives for the local families. Her hands were never idle. But in the stillness of those moments when she was alone, she allowed herself to miss him, but only for a minute, and then she moved forward again. 5. At church, Abby became the pillar of strength for the children's ministry. She taught Sunday school and hosted Christmas craft events. Her faith was unshakable, but it wasn't built on fairy tales or empty promises. It was built on a quiet belief that strength could be found in the things we endure. And in the moments of silence when the church bells tolled, Abby found the peace she hadn't known she needed. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had made peace with what was. 6. The town began to see her differently. She was no longer the girl who waited for Tyler. She was the woman who had learned to stand tall without him. The whispers changed from pity to admiration. People came to her for advice, for help, for her presence. And in their eyes, she found something she hadn't expected: respect. It wasn't because she was perfect, but because she was real, and she was enough. 7. Abby had always wanted to be someone who was needed, not for her ability to please, but for her ability to show up, steadily without question. And with every smile she gave, every task she completed, she began to fill a space in herself that had been hollowed out. Tyler had left a hole, but Abby had learned to fill it with purpose, with action, with meaning. Not with anger or regret, but with a quiet acceptance that life could go on, with or without him. 8. She started making small changes to her life, not in an attempt to forget him, but to heal on her own terms. She redecorated her living room, moved the couch to face the window, bought a new plant to replace the one that had died while she was waiting. She went to the library more often, read books that were about building things from nothing. She went for long walks in the snow, breathing in the winter air as if each step was a release. And little by little, the town stopped seeing her as the girl who had lost everything. 9. Abby had stopped needing Tyler to validate her existence. Her life was hers now, and it was full. She wasn't bitter. She was healed, in the way a wound slowly turns into a scar. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She found joy in the little things, in the smile of a child at the bakery, in the way the snowflakes caught the light just before dusk. 10. The town hadn't forgotten Tyler. They never would. But with every passing season, they stopped asking about him. They started asking about her. How had she managed to keep going? How had she turned the pain of losing him into something beautiful? Abby didn't have a perfect answer. She just smiled and kept going, because that was all she had to offer. 11. She didn't need to ask for forgiveness anymore. She had forgiven herself for staying too long, for loving too deeply, for believing in someone who wasn't ready to be loved. Her forgiveness didn't depend on Tyler's return. It depended on her own acceptance of the fact that sometimes people leave. And sometimes, it's not about finding them again. It's about finding yourself in their absence. Abby was learning to do that. 12. At Christmas, the town square sparkled with lights, but Abby didn't feel the familiar ache anymore. She decorated her little house with simple ornaments, crafted her own stockings, and made hot cocoa just for herself. She no longer dreaded the season. She embraced it, not for the memories it brought, but for the future she was creating. 13. The kids at the bakery had started to call her Miss Abby. It wasn't the first time, but it was the first time it felt real. She wasn't just someone who had been left behind. She was someone who had risen from that. She had become a part of their story, of the town's story, not because she was perfect, but because she showed up every day. And sometimes, that was enough. 14. She didn't know where Tyler was anymore. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she had built a life that didn't rely on him to complete her. That was the real gift she had given herself. The freedom to live, the freedom to love, and the freedom to let go. 15. Some nights she would walk past the old oak tree where they had carved their initials. The bark was weathered, the markings faint. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She just kept walking, the snow crunching underfoot, and realized that the past, while a part of her, didn't have to define her. It was behind her now, and that was enough. 16. Christmas Eve came and went, and she found herself standing alone in front of the tree. But this time the quiet didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. She didn't wait for Tyler to come home. She was home, in every way that mattered. And that was a victory no one could take from her. Not even him. 17. She had made peace with the past. And while that didn't mean she forgot, it meant she no longer needed it to hold her captive. Abby had learned to love herself without conditions, without waiting for someone else to fill the gaps. She had built a life without waiting. And that life was good. It was enough. 18. And maybe one day Tyler would come back. Maybe he wouldn't. But Abby wasn't waiting anymore, because she had finally found the one thing she needed most: herself. And that was a Christmas miracle all on its own. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the small town in silence and expectation. Every window glowed with golden lights, wreaths on doors, carols on the radio, and joy in the air. But inside Abby's heart, it was quiet, a quiet that sounded like unanswered prayers. She worked double shifts at the diner, hoping exhaustion would drown the ache of waiting. Each time the bell over the door rang, she looked up, just in case. But it was never him. Not this year. Not on this night. And still she wore the red scarf he gave her like a fragile shield. She poured coffee with a practiced smile, the kind that reached her lips but never touched her eyes. The regulars filled the booths with laughter, unaware that her heart had begun folding in on itself. No one asked about Tyler anymore, not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. She had become a symbol of patience, a woman quietly stitched together by faith and routine. But Christmas was cruel to the faithful, especially when promises go unmet. As the clock neared midnight, the diner emptied, one table at a time, and Abby was left with only flickering lights and the hollow echo of hope. Outside, the snow thickened, muffling the world in a soft, heavy silence. Abby locked up, turning off the lights one by one, her reflection fading from the glass. She stepped into the cold night, boots crunching over memories buried under ice. The wind nipped at her cheeks, but she welcomed the sting. It made her feel something. She passed the gazebo where Tyler once spun her around like she was made of magic. She paused, heart twisting with the weight of what could have been, what never was. Then she walked on, each step a quiet surrender. Back home, the cottage smelled of cinnamon and pine, but it only made the absence louder. She lit the single candle in her front window, as she did every year since he left. His mother used to say it was for guiding hearts home, but hers had grown tired of glowing. She curled up on the couch with a blanket, cocoa in hand, and silence all around. The photo of her parents on the mantel watched her with soft, eternal eyes. She whispered, "I tried. I waited." The candle flickered like it heard. Outside, snowflakes kissed the glass like soft goodbyes. Midnight came and went without miracle, without return. She let the tears fall, slow, silent, sacred. Not for him, but for herself. For all the December spent holding on to someone who let go first. She pressed her hand to her heart, willing it to forget the sound of his goodbye. But love has long memory, and wounds rehearse their stories in the dark. Still, she didn't curse him. She didn't hate him. She just missed the boy who once made her believe in forever. The next morning, the town woke up to bright skies and snow-covered rooftops. Children made angels in the yard, and families gathered with mugs and matching pajamas. Abby brewed coffee alone, the silence wrapping around her like a second skin. She dressed, smiled at the mirror, and chose to show up anyway. She wasn't waiting at the door anymore, but she hadn't closed it either. There was something holy in resilience, something brave in making space for healing. And so she carried on. Not whole, not broken, but beautifully in between. People noticed, even if they didn't speak it aloud. They saw her strength in how she stayed, how she served, how she smiled. They admired her grace, the way she never turned bitter, never blamed, never begged. But they didn't see the nights, the ones where she prayed with trembling lips. They didn't see the journal filled with letters he'd never read, or the drawer where she kept his old notes, folded like lifelines, or the one ornament she never hung again. At the church Christmas service, Abby sat in the back, hands clasped, eyes closed. She didn't ask for Tyler to return. That prayer had grown tired and quiet. She only asked for peace, to let go without forgetting, to remember without breaking. And when the choir sang "O Holy Night," she felt something stir deep inside. Not longing, not grief, but release. She sang with them, her voice cracked but steady. And maybe that was her miracle, choosing light in the absence of love. Back at the estate, the Prescott mansion remained dark that year. No carolers came, no family gathered, no son returned. Rumors said Tyler was overseas, chasing investments, chasing anything but home. But no one really knew, not even his parents. He had disappeared from the town the way snow vanishes in spring, quiet and complete. Abby stopped asking, stopped wondering, but she never stopped remembering. That year, she donated all her extra tips to the community food drive. She helped the school choir with costumes, mended old coats for the shelter. Her love had to go somewhere, so she gave it away, piece by piece. People said her kindness felt like Christmas itself, soft, unexpected, healing. She never told them it was survival. That giving was how she stayed human, how she stayed standing. That it was the only thing that made the silence bearable. On New Year's Eve, she stood outside, fireworks cracking overhead, champagne in other people's hands. She made no resolutions, no dramatic vows. She simply whispered, "Let it be different. Let me be different." The stars blinked above her, ancient and unbothered, and she felt for the first time that maybe she wasn't waiting anymore. Maybe she was becoming. Maybe that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Abby painted her kitchen cabinets blue. She rearranged the living room, changed the photos on the wall, not to erase him, but to reclaim the space he once filled, to breathe in places where grief had settled like dust. She laughed more, cried less, not because the pain was gone, but because she had made peace with its presence. She was healing, slowly, quietly, deeply. Sometimes, when the wind howled just right, she still heard his voice, not in words, but in memory, in rhythm, in ache. She didn't push it away anymore. She let it pass through her, like music from another room, once familiar, now distant. She had stopped needing closure to find peace. Some doors stay open, some roads are walked alone, and some love stories never find their ending. That Christmas became a turning point, unmarked by dramatic gestures but heavy with silent decisions. It was the year she chose herself, not out of anger, but out of mercy. The year she learned that absence can teach you what presence never could, that sometimes the bravest thing is not holding on, but releasing. She didn't know if Tyler would ever return, but she no longer lived in that question. She had made peace with the echo. The candle still sat in the window, but now more for tradition than hope. Its light glowed softer, steadier, like a woman who had made peace with her shadows. Neighbors called her strong, admirable, but Abby knew strength wasn't in the waiting. It was in the surviving. It was in waking up each morning and choosing joy without a reason, in giving love when you feel empty, in believing that even broken hearts can be beautiful. She started writing again. Short stories, poems, reflections. Words poured from her the way tears once had. She wrote about winter and warmth, silence and snow, endings and beginnings. And in those words, she found herself again. Not the girl Tyler had loved, but the woman she had become. Whole not because he came back, but because she didn't give up. Because she stayed. Because she grew. Years from now, if someone asked her about that Christmas, she would smile gently. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it shaped her. Because that pain taught her what love is and what it isn't, and how strong a woman can be when left standing in the cold. She wouldn't speak his name, but he would live in the story. Not as the ending, but as the beginning of her becoming, of her rising. That was the Christmas he didn't come home, but it was also the Christmas Abby came home to herself. To her courage, her truth, her quiet light. The kind of light that doesn't flicker, even when it's alone. And somewhere, in a town dusted with snow and memory, a candle still burns in the window. Not for the one who left, but for the woman who stayed. The sound of tires crunching the frozen gravel echoed through the quiet street. It had been years since anyone expected to see that truck again. But there it was, older, worn, familiar in all the wrong ways. Tyler stepped out. No longer the boy who once ran. His shoulders were broader, his face marked by years, not just age. The cold clung to him, but he didn't shiver. He looked around like a ghost, returning to a life that kept going without him. Abby was locking up the flower shop when she heard the door chime. She didn't even look up at first, just called out a warm, "Be right there." Then came a silence that made her glance toward the entrance. And there he was, standing still. A memory made real. She froze. The key slipped from her hand, clinking onto the floor. It wasn't anger that rose first. It was disbelief. And behind it, a pain that had been quiet for far too long. Tyler didn't speak. He let her look, let her process. Abby, always composed, felt a tremor run through her chest. "How?" she began, but stopped herself. Her breath caught in her throat like a secret too old to tell. His eyes didn't beg. They simply stayed steady, full of regret. "I came back for the tree lighting," he said softly, but both of them knew it wasn't about the lights. The town had started whispering within hours of his return. People peeked through frosted windows, pretending not to notice. But everyone noticed. Everyone remembered. He walked down Main Street like someone testing the weight of old sins, smiling only when children passed, like they were untouched by judgment. Tyler visited places that hadn't changed, and ones that had. And everywhere he went, he looked for Abby's shadow. At the diner, he sat at their old booth, now cracked with age. Martha served him coffee without a word, but her eyes said everything. He didn't expect forgiveness, not from them, not immediately. But he offered thank yous, eye contact, and presence. He knew this was a town that didn't forget, but also one that watched. And watching is what Abby did from across the street. She didn't hide. She stood tall, arms crossed, heart guarded. The first conversation was brief. "I see you still like black coffee," Abby said, walking into the diner. He looked up slowly. "And you still speak like you see through people." It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't an attack either. Just recognition. Two people who once knew each other intimately. The silence between them was heavier than words could fill. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't bitter. Just real. Tyler didn't apologize right away. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't say the things she'd imagined. He just kept showing up. In the same spaces at the same time. At the tree fundraiser. At the library donation drive. He helped shovel snow outside the church without being asked. He didn't announce his efforts, didn't make noise. But presence. It speaks volumes even when silent. Abby noticed how he spoke to her father now. Quietly, respectfully. They hadn't spoken since that last argument years ago. Now they exchanged cautious nods in passing. Even her father couldn't hide the slight softening in his gaze. The town softened too, little by little, moment by moment. But Abby? She wasn't there yet. She had learned that trust isn't offered just because someone returns. One night, she found a note tucked under the wreath on her shop door. It wasn't a letter, not really. Just a line. I didn't come back for forgiveness. I came back to grow roots. She held the paper longer than she meant to, folded it, unfolded it, read it again, then left it on her desk without replying. But it stayed there. All week. Tyler began helping at the community center where Abby volunteered, not to impress her, but to become part of the town again. He painted walls, organized supplies, even cleaned bathrooms. And when no one was looking, he fixed the broken piano pedal. He wasn't trying to erase the past. He was trying to plant something new. And Abby felt the ground shifting beneath her heart. At the Christmas tree lot, they crossed paths again. He was lifting a tree onto a truck when she arrived. She didn't mean to stare, but she did. He looked up, sweat on his brow despite the cold. "You always liked Douglas firs," he said without turning it into a question. "I still do," she answered, finally holding his gaze. A flicker passed between them, soft, uncertain, real. The next day, she found a small bundle of fir branches on her doorstep, tied with twine. No note this time, just memory. She didn't throw it away. She placed it beside the counter. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And honesty had been rare between them in the past. Now it was the only thing that mattered. Even in silence, his presence started to make noise inside her. On the night of the rehearsal for the Christmas Eve show, it snowed. Tyler stayed late, stringing up extra lights around the stage. Abby watched him from behind the curtain as he worked alone. No one asked him to. No one expected it. He wasn't trying to be seen. But she saw him. The man he'd become was quiet, intentional, grounded. Nothing like the boy who had left that winter night. The children sang carols while Tyler fixed the lights. One girl offered him a candy cane and said, "Are you the Christmas guy?" He laughed, genuinely, freely, for the first time since he returned. Abby saw that laugh, heard it in her bones, and something inside her cracked open, just a little. Not because he was trying, but because he wasn't pretending anymore. Her friend Dana pulled her aside at the bakery. "People change, Abby. You did. Why not him?" Abby didn't answer, just stirred her coffee slowly, because she knew change wasn't the problem. Believing it was real, that was the battle. She had survived once. She wasn't sure she could do it again, but she also wasn't sure she wanted to keep living with the wall. Tyler didn't ask for a second chance. He didn't ask for anything. He simply started living like this town still had a place for him. And slowly the town responded in kind. A head nod here, a shared laugh there. But Abby remained the mountain he couldn't climb, yet. Still, he showed up, day after day. On the morning of the Christmas festival, he left a package at her door. Inside, a photograph of them from years ago, framed in pine. And beneath it, a new picture of the town square he had taken last week. 2 moments, 2 lives. 1 silent question. Abby touched the frame and closed her eyes. Change had come home. Now the question was, would she open the door? That night, under the glow of string lights and falling snow, Tyler stood by the Christmas tree waiting. Not for forgiveness, not for permission, but for a moment of truth between 2 hearts. Abby walked through the crowd step by uncertain step. She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away. And that was the beginning of something deeper than return. Tyler stood in front of the small community center, hands in his coat pockets, the scent of pine and cinnamon wafting through the December air. Inside, carols played softly, and laughter echoed. Sounds that once filled his world, now distant and uncertain. He had returned with 1,000 apologies rehearsed in his mind, but none of them seemed to matter now. Not when Abby looked at him with those guarded eyes. not when her silence held more weight than any words he could speak. Redemption, he was learning, wasn't about speeches. It was about staying when it was easier to run. It was about enduring the silence. He tried to help, sweeping the icy steps outside the center, fixing broken lights, carrying boxes for the town's toy drive. People noticed but didn't say much. Some offered nods. Others still crossed the street. He didn't blame them. Trust, once broken, didn't rebuild with a gesture. It was layered, earned slowly, stitched with constancy. And that was what Tyler clung to now, the quiet, invisible stitches of redemption. Every act, every small kindness, was a thread. And though it wasn't grand, it was honest. He showed up, every day. Abby watched him from a distance, her arms often crossed, lips pressed into a thoughtful line. She didn't stop him, didn't tell him to leave. But she didn't welcome him either, and that in-between was harder than rejection, because it left space for hope. And hope, she had learned, could both heal and hurt. She wasn't ready to forgive, not because she hated him, but because she remembered what it felt like when he vanished, and how empty the silence had been. One evening, the heater failed in the old reading room of the library. Tyler heard and, without asking, arrived with tools and gloves. Abby was there when he crawled under the floorboards. She didn't speak, but she stayed. And when the warm air finally returned, she said quietly, "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first thread of something real. Tyler didn't respond with words. He just nodded and left his gloves behind. A silent symbol. He'd be back tomorrow. Redemption was not grand gestures. It was presence. It was helping Mrs. Keller shovel her driveway without being asked. It was bringing cocoa to the volunteers decorating Main Street, even when no one spoke to him. It was stopping by the diner just to leave a donation for someone else's meal. Tyler didn't try to impress Abby anymore. He wasn't chasing a reaction. He was just there. Slowly, the town started to notice. Whispers changed from cold stares to quiet acknowledgement. But Abby remained hesitant. She had rebuilt herself carefully, brick by brick, and she wasn't ready to hand over the key to her peace. Tyler's remorse was visible, yes, but she needed more than apology. She needed truth, vulnerability, the one thing he had always struggled to offer. She didn't want a man who returned full of words. She wanted one who stayed and listened, even when it was hard, especially then. One night after a church choir rehearsal, Tyler lingered near the pine trees outside. Abby passed him without a word, but he followed. "Do you still hate me?" he asked. His voice cracked like winter branches. Abby turned slowly. "I never hated you," she replied. "But you taught me how silence can scream louder than betrayal." Her words cut deep, but they were honest. And for the first time, Tyler didn't look away. He just nodded. "I know." He didn't defend himself, didn't explain. That to Abby meant more than any apology. She watched him walk away under falling snow, his figure disappearing into the night. And strangely, she didn't feel anger, just an ache, not for what they had been, but for what they might have been if only he had stayed when it mattered. But now, he was staying. And that changed everything. The next day, Abby returned to the town square to find Tyler stringing lights across the large fir tree in the center. His fingers were red from the cold, his movements slow but steady. A child handed him a cookie, and he smiled. Not the charming, polished smile from before, but a quiet, genuine one. Abby watched from a distance, and something inside her softened. Not melted, not yet, but cracked. Later that week, she found a letter in her mailbox. No name, just her address. Inside it read, "Redemption isn't about returning. It's about never leaving again. I'm here. Even if you never say a word to me again, I'll still be here." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need a name. The handwriting said everything, and she folded the paper, holding it close for a moment longer than she expected. Abby sat by her fireplace that evening, staring into the flames, her mind tangled with memories. She remembered the Christmas he didn't come home, how the lights felt dimmer, the cocoa colder, how she kept glancing at the door even when she promised herself she wouldn't. And now, he was here, quiet, changed, waiting. And she didn't know what to do with that. Her best friend, Lila, noticed. "You don't owe him anything," she said. "But maybe you owe yourself a chance to see if people can change." Abby didn't answer, but those words sat with her, whispering louder each day. Could people really change? Could hearts truly be restored, not with words, but with consistency? Redemption was not an apology. It was sweeping the snow outside the library every morning. It was waiting in the cold without expecting warmth. It was giving without taking. And Tyler, finally, seemed to understand that. He wasn't asking to be loved. He was learning to love, patiently, sacrificially, silently. The town's Christmas Eve celebration approached, and Abby found herself assigned to organize the carolers. She needed help with logistics, sound, lights. Tyler showed up without being asked. "I'm here to help, not to fix," he said simply. And for the first time, Abby let him, not as the man who broke her heart, but as someone trying to be better. They worked side by side all afternoon. Words were few, but glances lingered. And when the lights flickered on that night, bathing the square in golden warmth, Abby turned to him and said, "Thank you." He looked surprised. "For what?" he asked. "For staying," she whispered. That night, Tyler sat alone outside the community center, steam rising from his coffee. He didn't knock on Abby's door. He didn't try to force anything. And that, in itself, was a victory, because for the first time, he wasn't trying to win her back. He was learning how to be the kind of man who would have never left in the first place. Abby looked out her window and saw him there, not begging, not demanding, just present. And her heart didn't race with confusion or fear. It softened with something else entirely. Curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible after all. Not in grand endings, but in quiet, faithful beginnings. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in soft, white silence. And two hearts once shattered by absence now stood on the edge of something new. Redemption, Abby realized, wasn't a destination. It was a journey. And perhaps, just perhaps, she didn't have to walk it alone anymore. The town was wrapped in soft December silence, but inside Abby's chest, everything was loud. Tyler had shown up again that morning. Not with grand gestures or big words, but with a coffee in hand and eyes heavy with regret. They sat on the old wooden bench behind the library, the one where they had first dreamed of the future. Now, their future looked nothing like they imagined. Tyler's voice was low, careful, as if every word might shatter her. "I know I don't deserve to be here," he began, "but I needed to tell you everything." And Abby, holding her breath, knew this conversation would reopen every wound. "I left because I was scared," he said. "Not of you. Of not being enough." His hands were shaking slightly, his breath visible in the cold. He spoke of the pressure, of the expectation to carry a legacy he never asked for. He told her how Christmas at his family's estate had always been about performance, not presence. When she asked why he didn't say any of this before, his voice cracked. "Because I didn't know how to say it without sounding weak." Abby blinked back tears, not for what he said, but for how familiar that fear was. Forgiveness didn't happen in that moment. It didn't come like a soft snowfall or a sudden sunrise. It was slower, harder, more human than that. "Do you think saying sorry is enough?" Abby asked, her voice steady but fragile. "No," he said, "but I came back to show you who I've become. Not to ask for what we had." That honesty, bare and trembling, moved something inside her. Still, the ache in her chest reminded her not to forget too quickly. They walked through the Christmas market in silence, side by side. Lights glowed overhead, families laughed, carolers sang just a street away. None of it matched the tension between them. But Tyler didn't try to fill the silence. He didn't reach for her hand. He let her feel everything, even the distance. Sometimes love meant giving space instead of closing it. And Abby, despite herself, respected him more for not rushing what she wasn't ready to give. Later that night, Abby found herself staring at the journal she kept. The pages were filled with entries from the Christmas he left. Anger, grief, sleepless nights, She reread her own handwriting and remembered the girl she had to become without him. That girl was stronger now, not waiting, not begging. She could look him in the eyes and say, "You hurt me," without crumbling. And that, she realized, was the start of forgiveness. The next day, Tyler helped repair the town nativity display. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing, just quietly showed up with tools and time. Abby saw him from the corner of the square, kneeling on frozen ground, fixing what others had ignored. That image stayed with her long after she walked away. Maybe redemption wasn't in the words he spoke, but the things he did when no one was looking. Maybe forgiveness grew in the spaces where humility lived. On Sunday, he showed up at church. He sat in the back pew, unnoticed by most, but not by Abby. When the pastor spoke about grace being a process, not a performance, she saw Tyler's shoulders drop, as if someone had finally said out loud what he carried all along. Afterward, he didn't approach her, just nodded, then left. And that somehow meant more than any bouquet or apology. He was learning to listen to her silence. Abby had coffee with her best friend later that afternoon. "So, are you going to forgive him?" her friend asked. Abby stirred her cup slowly, eyes distant. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I think I'm not as angry as I was, and sometimes that was enough." Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a door she could open slowly, one quiet Christmas step at a time. When Tyler returned to the town square days later, he found a note on the bench. It wasn't long. Just a folded scrap of paper with 5 words. "I see that you stayed." He held it for a long time, the wind biting his fingers. He didn't smile. He just breathed, deeply, because he knew that note didn't mean things were fixed. It meant he mattered again, and that changed everything. At the Christmas charity event, Abby stood beside Tyler for the first time in public. Not as a couple, not as enemies, just 2 people rebuilding something fragile. When a neighbor whispered, "Didn't he leave her?" Abby simply smiled. "He came back," she said, "and stayed when it wasn't easy." The other woman looked surprised. But Abby wasn't defending him. She was honoring herself. Forgiveness began to look like shared silence, like warm cocoa passed between them after a long shift. Like him asking, "How was your day?" and meaning it. Like her answering, slowly, without guarding every word. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about making space for the present. And slowly, that space became a place they could both breathe. One night, Tyler asked, "Do you believe I've changed?" Abby looked at him for a long time, the lights of the tree reflected in her eyes. "I think you're trying," she said. He nodded, not needing more. Because forgiveness wasn't earned overnight. It was witnessed in consistency. And he was finally showing up for the long haul. They talked more often now. Not about the past, but about how to rebuild trust. About who they were now and who they were becoming. Abby set boundaries, and Tyler honored everyone, even when it hurt, even when it would have been easier to walk away again. He stayed. That, in itself, was love in action. Abby still had doubts. Nights when she'd wake from dreams of the old pain. But each time she'd remember how he looked at her lately, without expectation, only hope. She wasn't rushing. He wasn't demanding. They were relearning the art of presence. And in the quiet of winter, something softer began to grow. Not what they had before. Something better. Forgiveness looked like Tyler handing out blankets at the shelter. Like him fixing broken heaters at the elementary school. Like him asking people's names and remembering them. Abby watched from afar, choosing not to praise, just to observe. He wasn't doing it for her. That's how she knew it was real. Redemption had finally rooted in his character. By the end of the week, the town had stopped whispering. People started nodding to Tyler again, some even smiling. He never asked for acceptance, but it found him anyway. And Abby? She finally walked beside him without flinching. Still guarded, still healing, but ready to see what came next. On Christmas Eve, Abby sat alone on her porch. Snow fell softly, lights twinkled across rooftops, and a deep peace settled in her chest. She thought of Tyler, of the boy who left and the man who stayed. She didn't know if love would return, but she knew forgiveness had started. And sometimes that was the miracle, the quiet kind, wrapped in stillness. Inside, a single candle flickered by the window. A symbol, a hope, a maybe. When Tyler passed by and saw it, he paused. He didn't knock. He just smiled through the snow, whispered thank you, and walked on. Forgiveness was never about finishing. It was about choosing, one breath, one step, one Christmas at a time. The town square glowed under thousands of warm lights, a living postcard of everything Christmas was meant to be: hope, warmth, and second chances. Snow drifted gently from the night sky, settling on rooftops and tree branches like blessings from heaven. Children laughed near the nativity scene, their breath visible in the cold, crisp air. Abby stood just beyond the lights, heart pounding, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. She hadn't planned to see him tonight. She hadn't planned for anything that was happening. But maybe that was the magic of this night. It came even for the unprepared. Tyler approached from across the square, hands in his coat pockets, eyes searching until they landed on her. The moment froze like a still frame from a film. Abby in her red scarf, snow catching in her lashes, and Tyler's expression torn between fear and hope. He walked slowly, unsure if she would stay or turn away. Each step felt like a lifetime, but Abby didn't move. Her fingers gripped the cocoa, steadying her. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was full. "I wasn't going to come," he said finally. "I didn't think I deserved to be part of this night." His voice cracked with vulnerability. "But I couldn't stay away." Abby's heart stung with all the years they'd lost. Yet there he was, standing in front of her. Older, softer, changed. "I didn't expect you to," she replied. "But you did." He nodded. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, Abby, but never about you. You were always home." The words hovered in the air, fragile, sincere, and Abby let them in. They walked together through the glowing streets, passing families, memories, and years too long left silent. The town didn't stare the way they used to. Perhaps they had all moved on, or perhaps they were rooting for something to be restored. Tyler pointed out the new bookstore, the choir warming up, the tree he used to climb as a boy. "It all looks the same," he whispered. "But everything inside me feels different." Abby listened quietly. He didn't need to be impressive anymore. He just needed to be honest. They sat on the bench near the gazebo, where years ago they'd kissed for the first time. The memory ached in Abby's chest, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was softened by time, by grace, by healing. "I thought about this night every year," Tyler admitted. "But I wasn't ready to come back until now, until I could offer something real." He pulled out a small envelope and placed it in her hand. Abby hesitated. "What is it?" she asked. "The deed," he said, "to my father's house. I'm giving it to the town as a shelter, in your name." Abby's breath caught. She opened the envelope and stared at the signed document. "I wanted to turn something broken into something good," he said. "I thought maybe, if it could help someone else find home, maybe I'd understand what it means again." Tears burned her eyes. He hadn't come to reclaim the past. He came to redeem it. That was the difference. "You don't need to do this for me," she said softly. "I'm not." He looked into her eyes. "I'm doing it because I finally understand what love does. It gives, without expecting." They sat in silence again, the town alive around them. Carolers sang nearby, their voices rising with joy. Children chased each other around the Christmas tree. And for a moment, the past didn't weigh so heavy. Tyler leaned back, his hands trembling slightly. "I still have so much to unlearn," he said. "So much to prove." Abby smiled sadly. "Maybe it's not about proving anymore. Maybe it's about being present, choosing, every day." He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Can I start now?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand, warm and familiar, yet new in its intention. Her fingers laced with his slowly, not as a promise, but as an opening. We're not who we were, she said. But maybe that's the point. Snow swirled around them as the church bells rang midnight. Christmas had officially arrived. And with it, something deeper than forgiveness. A choice. A choice to build, not from scratch, but from what remained true even after everything. Back at the community center, Abby lit the last candle on the table beside the window. Tyler followed behind, placing toys near the tree for the morning drive. The room smelled of pine and cinnamon. He moved slower now, not from hesitation but from intention. Every gesture seemed to carry weight. When she turned around, she saw the way he looked at the room, at the people, at her, with reverence. "You've built something beautiful," he said. "You helped me remember how." Later, as families gathered to pray, Tyler stood beside her. Not leading, not commanding, just present. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to share something before the prayer, Tyler surprised them all by stepping forward. "I don't have much to offer," he began, voice low. "But I know what it's like to walk away from what matters. And I know what it means to find a way back." The room was quiet. If there's grace for someone like me, maybe we all still have a chance. People wept. Not because of what he lost, but because of what he found. Abby felt it deep in her chest, that rare kind of silence that comes not from emptiness but fullness. After the prayer, Tyler sat back beside her, shoulders lighter. "That wasn't for them," he whispered. "It was for me." She nodded. "I know." The weight between them was shifting, not vanishing, but being shared. That was something new. As the night neared its end, Tyler offered to walk her home. They passed familiar porches, frozen gardens, and childhood echoes. The path they took wasn't a straight line. It curved like memory does, sometimes painful, sometimes soft. When they reached her front door, he hesitated. "I don't want to mess this up," he said quietly. Abby turned to him, eyes searching. "Then don't try to fix it all at once, just stay present, keep showing up." He nodded, almost in relief. Then, gently, he stepped closer. The space between them disappeared, not rushed, but chosen. He kissed her, not like the first time, not like someone who wanted to possess, but like someone who finally understood what it meant to remain. Snow fell softly around them, blurring the world, until all that was left was this moment, this choice. Inside, the lights from the tree cast a golden glow through the windows. The house didn't feel empty anymore, and neither did she. Tyler lingered at the doorway. "I'll see you in the morning?" he asked. Abby nodded. "Yes? We have cocoa to serve, toys to sort." She smiled. "And maybe a future to rewrite." His lips parted in the shape of a silent thank you. Then he left, not as a man fleeing, but as one returning. Upstairs, Abby stood by the window, watching the snow, replaying the night like a film she never thought she'd live. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic closure, just small things, honest things, true things. Sometimes that's how redemption begins, not in fireworks but in footsteps, in a hand held, in a name spoken without bitterness. She looked down at the community center where candles still flickered and volunteers cleaned up. She had stayed. She had believed in goodness, even when it hurt. And somehow, it came back to her, not in the form she imagined, but in the form she needed. Tyler wasn't the same man, and she wasn't the same girl, but maybe that's what made this possible. They weren't going back. They were starting again. Outside, the town breathed in peace, no longer haunted by what could have been, but gently lit by what could still be. The Christmas that changed everything hadn't come with music or miracles. It came in quiet returns, in a bench shared, in a name whispered like a prayer, in a story rewritten by grace, not guilt. And as the stars blinked through the snowfall, one thing was certain. The heart always remembers what it was made for. Love, presence, home. And this time, neither Abby nor Tyler would walk away. Not when they'd finally learned how to stay. The lights of the small town glowed like promises kept. The square, now quiet after the celebration, echoed the laughter of earlier hours. Abby stood in front of the gazebo where it had all unfolded, her hand wrapped in Tyler's. There was no more hiding, no more pretending they hadn't been changed. The town had witnessed it all. The breaking, the waiting, the returning. And now, it bore witness to a new beginning. One not born of grand gestures, but of small holy decisions. Tyler looked at Abby like he'd never really seen her until now. And maybe he hadn't, not in the way that mattered. She had become more than the girl he left behind. She had become the woman who taught him what redemption really cost. It wasn't just coming back. It was staying. It was listening. It was choosing, again and again, to be present. And he was ready now, not to erase the past, but to build a future that honored it. They walked in silence for a while, past the bakery that once smelled of regret and now felt like home, past the bench where she used to sit alone, and where he had once walked by without courage. The snow crunched beneath their boots, soft and steady like the pace of healing. Above them, stars blinked like silent witnesses. "I never deserved this," he whispered. Abby squeezed his hand. "None of us do. That's why it's called grace." Inside the bakery, the warmth welcomed them like an embrace. A few twinkling lights still flickered on the tree she had decorated alone for years. Now he stood beside her, helping straighten an ornament. It was such a simple thing, but for Abby, it meant everything. He was helping, not saving, showing up, not rescuing. And in that small moment, she knew. Love wasn't loud. It was consistent. The bell above the bakery door jingled as people came in for cocoa and community. Neighbors who once whispered now offered warm greetings. The town hadn't forgotten, but it had softened. They had seen Abby's strength, and now they saw Tyler's change. Redemption, after all, wasn't only for the one who left. It was for the one who stayed, who dared to hope in silence. Abby's mother wiped a tear as she watched them serve hot drinks side by side. "You're different," she said to Tyler. He nodded, because she didn't give up on kindness. Abby turned at those words, and because God didn't give up on either of us. The room quieted for a breath. Hearts softened, and something deeper than forgiveness passed between them. Faith, that maybe broken things really could be rebuilt. Later that night, they returned to the square. Snow fell again, gentler this time, like a curtain closing on the old story. Tyler held out a small box. Not flashy, not grand. Just a simple gold ring. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for the chance to earn your yes every day." Abby's eyes filled. "Then let's start with today." He slipped the ring onto her finger like a prayer. They didn't rush home. They stood in the middle of the empty street, wrapped in scarves and light and silence. A new kind of silence. The kind that didn't ache. The kind that spoke of peace. A car passed slowly, honking in celebration, and Abby laughed. Tyler joined her, and in that shared laughter they knew. They had made it to the other side, not without wounds, but with deeper hearts. A few weeks later, the bakery reopened under a new name. Second Light. A tribute to grace, to second chances, and to the Christmas that changed everything. Customers came not just for cookies, but for hope. And every smile Abby offered carried the strength of someone who had learned to stay when it hurt, who believed again even after loss, who forgave slowly but truly. Tyler worked in the back, not needing the spotlight. Sometimes he'd just pause and watch her from afar, the way she moved with quiet joy, the way she made others feel seen. He still wrestled with guilt, still faced the shadows of his past. But now, he didn't do it alone. And every time she looked back and smiled at him, it felt like a new page turning. On Christmas Eve, they hosted a small gathering. Friends, family, the ones who had stayed, the ones who had returned. They lit candles and shared stories, some painful, most redemptive. Tyler read a verse about new mercies each morning. Abby read one about love that endures all things. And together they sang softly about holy nights and silent nights, nights where everything changed. After the guests left, they stood by the window watching the snow. Tyler held Abby close, forehead against hers. "I used to think I had to earn love." She looked into his eyes. "You just have to receive it and reflect it." That night, they didn't talk much more. They didn't need to. The silence was full. Their hearts were full. And for the first time in a long time, they rested. The town would go on. Seasons would pass. But every Christmas, the story would be told again, of the girl who stayed and the boy who came back changed, of forgiveness that wasn't instant, but honest, of love that took time, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable, and of a God who redeems, not in thunder, but in stillness, not with fireworks, but with snow. Abby and Tyler didn't become perfect, but they became present. They learned how to disagree with grace, how to comfort without fixing, how to stay even when it was easier to leave. And through that, their love deepened, not in intensity, but in weight. A love that could carry them through anything. Years later, children would play under the same lights where they once fought and forgave. And Abby would tell them stories about the Christmas that healed everything. Tyler would listen from the doorway, smiling. The bakery would smell of cinnamon and second chances, and strangers would feel at home without knowing why. And maybe that's what redemption really is. Not a grand comeback, not a perfect ending, but a series of small, steady choices to return, to rebuild, to remain. Christmas didn't magically fix everything, but it became the turning point, the quiet miracle, the sacred interruption. On a snowy night, long after the tree lights had dimmed, Abby found a letter in her coat pocket. In Tyler's handwriting it said, "Thank you for waiting, without waiting, for loving, without expecting, for showing me that coming home starts with becoming new." She pressed the letter to her chest and smiled. And so in a town that remembered everything, Christmas became the season of letting go, of embracing what returns transformed, of believing that even silent prayers whispered in the coldest nights are heard. And somewhere between the snowflakes and the light, two hearts learned that grace doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes wrapped in warmth and sealed with a kiss.